I think overall people are very happy with Drinkwitz's recruiting ability. And that's been a really big thing is at the University of Missouri, you saw maybe a dip in recruiting after Gary Pinkel left at the last regime. And now you're starting to see more of that high level talent choosing to come to Missouri over Oregon's or Alabama's or Texas A&M's or Texas. They're in the conversation with those high end schools, just beat Michigan out for Hilson. And like there's some pretty serious conversations of athletic ability that you are having in Columbia. And I think that's a big reason for Eli Drinkwitz. Again, I want to go back to the game against Arkansas. They had 3 guys that they flipped who were committed to other schools that were at the game, and they were able to convince them to come to the University of Missouri by being at that snow game that they had against Arkansas. I don't think that's a coincidence, right? I think that's Drink being really good at being able to sell the vision that he has.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Hello, and welcome to a special signing day edition of the Verbal Commitment Podcast on Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Home Field Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here with Ryan Wallace of GoPowerCat.com and 24/7 Sports, and we're talking about the world of local recruiting, from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. It about 3 o'clock on National Signing Day. We just got finished filming a separate episode on Kansas's 2025 class, and we're here right now to talk about the signing class inked by Missouri. For those interested in the Jayhawks and the Kansas State Wildcats, head to those respective KCSN channels for class breakdowns of those schools. As always, if you like what you're hearing, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts like Apple or Spotify. All those things help to grow the show and get us in front of more people like you. Later in the show, we'll be joined by good friend Tucker Franklin of KCSN's Mizzou, That's Who, to talk further about the Tigers class. But let's go ahead and get started. The Tigers have been busy in the last week, landing 4-star defensive end Javion Hilson, a former Florida State commitment, 4-star wide receiver Demarion Folks, a former Pittsburgh commitment, and a pair of running backs in Marquise Davis, a former Kentucky commitment, and Florida Boise State commitment Brandon Haywood. Those signees have Missouri tipping the scales as the number 19 class in the country, according to 24/7 Sports, a group that, as of us shooting this episode, includes 17 players.
You have to say that. I mean, in today's day and age, you have to say that, Kevin.
Yeah, and Ryan, it is the highest ranked class of the 3 local recruiting classes, which is pretty typical for a Missouri class.
Mm-hmm. I mean, life in the SEC. You look at the commitment list, and one guy that I know is Jason King over at DeSmet, a linebacker that K-State really would have loved to have had, and he committed to Missouri fairly early. He's the lowest rated player in this class as an 88. Like, that's just the SEC. It means more, and in recruiting, it just hits different, Kevin.
The highest ranked player in this class is quarterback Matt Zollers, who was actually a guest on our very first show of Verbal Commitment. 24/7 Sports ranks him as the number 7 quarterback and number 64 overall player in the 2025 class. Ryan, what do you like about Zollers?
Well, pre-injury, let me preface that by saying that is I'm very curious to see, how he progresses. Granted, I don't know if he was going to be needed right away anyway. It sounds like Missouri is going to head into the portal a little bit. And I heard earlier, I think it was from Power Mizzou, actually, that there was some reports about maybe, what is it? The 2 first names, Miller Moss from USC. So anyway, all that to say, getting back to Zollers, I don't know if even if he was healthy, they were really ready to unleash him this year. But precision passer, there's a lot of things when I watch his tape that are kind of reminiscent of another guy from that area, and that's Will Howard. They're different in body style, but I just go back and Will was a really good passer. I think K-State fans kind of remember him for kind of his running style and whatnot. But I mean, he was a pretty polished passer coming out of that area of the country near Philadelphia. And I think the same can be said for Zollers. And He's going to be surrounded by tremendous wide receivers. So I think, it's a blessing for him, Kevin, that he can show up in Columbia, not have a ton of pressure as a close to, 5-star type player, to be able to kind of work with really, really good players on the scout team and get himself back to full strength and give it a go here in maybe a year or two. And Lord knows what kind of Matt Zollers we'll see by that point.
One of the things that he said that he liked when we had him on the show was the growth process that he saw with Brady Cook and what he went through. Brady Cook wasn't asked to be everything all at once as a freshman. He was a guy that even when he first started really seeing the field, that wasn't the Brady Cook that we saw by the end of his career. And so I do think that he's going to get a nice roadway to kind of get back to being the best version of Matt Zollers that gives him the best chance to win a starting job down the road. And so good situation for him to go into if they wind up hitting the transfer portal and finding somebody that can bridge that gap a little bit.
Wouldn't you agree too that, again, if you're an incoming quarterback, I would think that just about any quarterback, the vast majority probably are better suited redshirting, right? Or not being thrown right into the fire. But especially if you're coming into the SEC with the amount of speed, with the amount of size that you're going to see on defense, it wouldn't be good for anybody to get thrown into the mix. And so, like you said, I mean, correctly pointed out by Matt when he was on the show of having the ability to, again, be a, hyped recruit, but also not be rushed along at Missouri is it's really kind of a blessing in disguise for him and any other quarterback that has to, get thrown into the fire in the SEC. You don't want to have to do that if you don't have to.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, we talked to quarterback trainer Justin Hoover on one of our earlier episodes. He's Drew Lock's quarterback coach, and I strictly remember Drew Lock coming back after kind of getting thrown into the fire a little bit and saying, "Man, the SEC, those windows, they close."
Yes.
Where I thought I'd be able to throw the ball, I couldn't. And obviously Drew Lock was able to work through that and come out on the other side and be a really good SEC quarterback, but tough for any young quarterback to come into that situation. Speaking of guys that you like, who's a player in Missouri's class that kind of stands out to you as a great get? It can just be somebody you like, or it could be in relation to their recruiting ranking. Go either way.
There's a lot of guys at the top that I could talk about that the film just pops, right? But there's a guy that I'm going to go a little bit deeper down the commitment list here, and maybe he classifies as a sleeper in some regards, but I look at his film and his tape, and the more I watch Althoff Catholic's Jason Dow, the defensive tackle, there's a lot to like. And I love wrestlers that are at defensive tackle. And I mean, you see the swim move and the pass rush pursuits here. He is awfully nimble for a guy that is bordering on, 300 pounds. And you watch in all of these clips, the way that he pursues, there's the power and the strength at the point of contact and how aggressive he is. But you watch how he runs down plays. He's not just a between the tackles guy. He's not just in the box. He is a hunter at defensive tackle. And again, a guy that when you're a wrestling background, you understand leverage. You understand kind of where the power and the strength really comes from. And so when I look at Jason and think about him in the SEC conference, it's a guy that I think you've got to have the ability to move. You've got to have the ability to be powerful, to go against, guys that are really big and really agile on the offensive side of the ball. So I just think there's a ton to like for a guy that, again, I say he's only an 89, Kevin. In this class, he's, fourth from the bottom of this group. But I think that it might not be the kind of twitched up guy that excites you as an SEC fan that you're kind of become accustomed to getting. But this is the definition of a defensive tackle and what you want your defensive tackle to be.
To your point about leverage too, I think he's productive in his movement. And what I mean by that is, you ever swim in a pool next to somebody and it feels like you're not really going anywhere, and they are a good swimmer, and so they take a stroke and they're all of a sudden over there. Dowell, you see that when that guy hits somebody with the swing move, when he hits somebody with leverage or movement, he doesn't get stuck on the block at that point. He swims past and he is by. There's an economy of movement that I think you see with wrestlers as well, where I hesitate to say teleport because that's a large human being to teleport, but they don't move without purpose. And I think that you see that with him, his movement, the way he uses his hands, it's very efficient.
Well, and the other thing too that I'll finish with Jason, and you mentioned it there, is like he's listed at 6'4". Now, again, sometimes those listings change once they actually get to campus, but he plays a lot smaller than 6'4" in terms of his height. And I think, again, that's a compliment because he understands that, the lower man wins in the trenches. And he's got great bend for 6'4". So, yeah, from my guy in the trenches to your guy in the trenches, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat and grab a guy that I know both of us absolutely love in Eureka's Jack Lang. I think, quite frankly, Ryan, if we were doing the rankings for this class and doing Missouri's class, I'm not sure we wouldn't have him as Missouri's number one commitment. Missouri recently had a commitment from 5-star offensive tackle in Lamont Rogers, who flipped over to Texas A&M. And nothing against Rogers, but I kind of think both of us maybe like Lang a little bit more than
Dimony Lang.
Exactly. And there's a lot to life there, Ryan, when you look at the way that he moves, you look at the length, as a 6'8" guy, and then to have all of that. And on that clip, you saw him finish. And that's the thing that I really like with him is the frame, great. The agility for that frame, outstanding. But Ryan, he's also got some mean to him. This is a guy that does not hesitate to put somebody onto the ground.
No. I mean, pass pro is solid. Run blocking is solid. He has the size right now ready to go. There's not a lot of, weight that needs to be added. There's not a lot of bad weight that needs to be taken off. He's a guy that you can just tell has taken care of himself, that has, taken a lot of interest into like how he crafts his game. Missouri is spoiled. Let's put it this way, because to have a guy like Jack Lang in your backyard and then go the next class down and have a guy that's probably better than Lang in Jackson Cantwell in 2026, that is just absurd. And I'll say this, man, if Missouri if they can get Lang in 25 and can hang around for Cantwell in 26, that is a line of lines, Kevin.
Yes, it absolutely is. Lang ranked as actually the number 4 player in Missouri's class, which again speaks to the strength at the top of that class. For a sleeper, Ryan, I actually I'll throw a guy out. How about East St. Louis athlete Charles Bass? He's the second lowest guy in Missouri's class, but as an 88 rated player, that's not really saying a whole lot.
No, I mean, he is, the thing that I love about his tape is that you can see that he is a guy that is obviously very active. He's aggressive, but he's calculated in it. The ball, skills like you see there are, more reminiscent of like a receiver. The joke is always, if you play defense, you probably don't have hands. And I think he's definitely the type of guy that doesn't, fit, but he's got the physicality. But you see him at safety, you see him at corner, you see him here kind of in the slot. He can handle all sorts of different coverages. And I just think that, when you think about Bass, this is a guy that, again, there's always that kind of one sleeper in every class that rises to the top. And he's the type of guy that, like I said, is just so balanced in everything that he does. Usually when you get down to the kind of the bottom of a class, you're looking at guys that are maybe efficient in one area and just don't have it in others. And I don't get that with Charles Bass. He is very balanced across the board.
I know before the show, I kind of referred to him, and I don't mean this as an insult at all, as kind of a poor man's J.J. Dunnigan, because you and I think Dunnigan is the number 1 player in the state of Kansas for 2026. The thing about Dunnigan is he's a chess piece. You can move him around and do a lot of different things with him. He could stick at corner. We love him at safety because the coverage plays up so much. He can play center field safety. He can play a safety lined up over a receiver and cover him in man. He can climb into the box. as a safety and either, defend a tight end or get downhill in the running game. And he's got ball skills to do all of the above. I see a lot of those similar traits in Charles Bass, maybe not quite the frame that Dunnigan has, and maybe not quite the upper tier part of that, but I think very similar, and a guy that you can move around and ask to do a lot of things, and also a guy that you aren't really going to be able to pick on at any level.
No. Yeah. I mean, and again, there's a lot of different guys that I think maybe he compares to, from Missouri guys of the past. I'm kind of going through trying to, wrap my brain a little bit and go back into the past. I mean, he's probably not quite the physicality yet and then the specimen that William Moore was. But I mean, he can play that way. You see that level of physicality in his tape. But I mean, it's another one of these guys that, to me, Kevin, follows again in kind of the line of what Missouri wants and what they've shown to want lately in the Eli Drinkwitz era of out of their DBs, kind of long, Enos Rakestraw type guys, Chris Abrams-Drain type guys. And Bass seems to have that, right? Even if he's not, 6'4" or whatever, he's got the length and he plays with a mentality of violence, which is exactly what we've seen from Missouri safeties of recent memory.
Absolutely. We will have our chat with Mizzou That's Who's Tucker Franklin here in a bit. But first, we wanted to tell you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. Headed to Mizzou Arena this winter and needing to show your school spirit, Home Field has you covered with some of the hippest and most classic t-shirt designs you'll find, along with sweatshirts, jackets, and outerwear throw on over the top of said t-shirt when you're headed outside when the game's over. Missouri has more than 40 items to choose from, so head to homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code linked below in the description. You can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. It's National Signing Day in the early signing period, and we're joined by friend and KCSN's own Tucker Franklin, host of the Mizzou That's Who podcast. Tucker, thanks for stopping by.
Hey, appreciate you guys thinking of me. I'm rocking my Home Field Apparel too. I got the hoodie on there, so I can't go on a podcast and talk about the Tigers without wearing Home Field Apparel either. So I mean, look, it's just talking football and wearing Home Field Apparel. They just go right hand in hand.
Hey, I love that ad sell right there. That's good. If you could bring out the holiday bottle, while you're doing it, we could nail like all the bases at once. But Tucker, as a Missouri guy, like, how does it excite you when the #1 guy in your class is a quarterback?
Yeah. Well, look, let's not sugarcoat things. Things could be better at the quarterback position for Missouri. And I think a lot of Missouri fans, a lot of people around the Missouri program, I've kind of thought that a little bit too. And they've tried to get some guys in the portal. They've tried to find other solutions elsewhere at the quarterback position. And to have a quarterback like Matt Zollers, you guys had an opportunity to sit down with a great conversation with him. Good kid who is very active with this class too. He really wants to be at Missouri. He wants guys to come to Missouri with him. And he was like another recruiter for those guys over there in Columbia. It was really awesome to see a guy be so gung-ho about the University of Missouri, and a guy who's so talented too, to be this gung-ho about the University of Missouri. You see it with Luther Burden, right? Luther Burden obviously committed to the University of Missouri, very talented, gung-ho about the university. Even mentioned that in his when he declared for the NFL, he made to make sure, like, hey, I'm still a Missouri guy. Even though I'm leaving after 3 years, I'm still going to be a Missouri guy. So it's awesome to see a quarterback come in there. Look, a very talented, athletic guy, a guy who's in the Elite 11, can really spin it. I think he's got some room to grow and some room to develop. There might be a little bit of a gap here there before he really starts for Missouri. But I think it's very exciting for a lot of the Mizzou faithful to see a quarterback being the guy headlining a class.
Tucker, I got to know from the standpoint of a Missouri fan, what does it feel like to be the 19th ranked class in the country and 11th in your own league? That is like soul crushing, right?
Yeah, it is. I was even looking at that a little bit too, and they were 23rd. I think when I was looking at it, they've had some signing day flips that they were able to pull off there with Drinkwitz and company. But yes, the SEC is very stacked when it comes to the recruiting, especially in the high school ranks. The transfer portal classes too. I'm sure when we get into those, we'll see how those all pan out and everything like that. But You're right. It is one of those things where you feel like you've had a pretty darn good year. You've had a good year recruiting guys, flipping guys, getting guys on campus to Columbia, and he's just still 11th. And it's one of those things where you just kind of got to trust the process there with Drinking Company. They've been able to do some good stuff. But yeah, SEC, tough league to try to match up with it in terms of recruiting legs.
We talked about it in the first segment, and I know you're a big offensive line guy. Like you go to the OLU stuff and all of those different things. Break down Jack Lang for us, because obviously he's a guy that both of us love, that looks like to us, and we said in the first segment, Lamont Rogers obviously was committed to Missouri, flipped to Texas A&M. We would actually rather have Jack Lang of the two. What do you see from Jack Lang?
Man, he's got a huge frame. He's got that NFL body on him already, and he's got plenty of room to grow into it too. You watch a lot of these huddle clips that you see these guys, he's throwing dudes out the club. Like, he has got that grown man strength already at 18 years old. And when I watch him, I get excited for the potential. Look, Missouri has had a really good offensive lineman, Cody Strader, a couple years ago. They really got the opportunity to gel as the year went on this year. To have a guy that's going to be in there with Logan Reichert, a guy who I believe is either last year or 2 years ago, who came in and is really growing there, going to gel there. Another really big-bodied guy. He reminds me a little bit of him in some sense of things. But what's really good about Jack Lang, he can get out in space. He can move. He's got that fluidity. And he's not just like when you see those big, huge, nearly 300-pound dudes, you think, oh, he can't move. He's athletic. He's an athletic dude. I think he's got a little bit of a track and field background on him as well. So, like, he is one of those guys that I am maybe most excited for in this class. You guys mentioned Lamont Rogers. I don't think there was any surprise in the Missouri coaching staff when he decommitted or that he was going to decommit. I feel like it's been one of those things that was a very public secret for quite some time with Lamont Rogers going to A&M. But I think that Missouri is actually pretty happy with how their offensive line class ended out overall.
It's pretty crazy when you start to think about it. And I hadn't thought about it until you just brought up Reichert's name. I mean, a Raytown High guy. You've got the Thule Summit North guys. You've got Jack Lang. I mean, Missouri has just been able to reap the rewards within their backyard at offensive line. So that's pretty awesome if you're a Tigers fan. In the previous segment, Tiger, Kevin and I kind of went through a couple of the guys that excite us in this class, and Jack Lang being one of them. Who kind of gets your gears going when you think about them here in the future wearing black and gold?
Well, it's probably a guy that, I didn't truthfully pay a whole lot of attention to until recently when I heard he was coming to campus for the last game of the season. And you see that and you're like, wait, he's committed and he's coming to campus for the last game of the season. There might be something afoot here. Marquise Davis, the running back, man. He is, a lot of guys are very high on his ability out of Cleveland Heights, Ohio, obviously. People probably know that at that high school if you're familiar with the Kansas City Chiefs with the Kelsey brothers coming out of there. But number 18 running back in the country, was committed to Kentucky, comes to campus, and Drink's able to flip him. This is also talking about the running back class as a whole, where you had Jamarian Morrow in this class, who does go to Texas A&M as well. Missouri keeps losing guys to Texas A&M. But they're able to flip two running backs to kind of fill in their running back class that they had as well. But he's one of those guys that is a dynamic athlete. I think he could be a featured back in this offense. And Missouri has done a really good job with running backs recently in terms of producing them. And really in the whole history of Missouri, there's always been some pretty good feature backs at the University of Missouri. I think he could be a next one. You match him with Kawan Lacey, who's already there. Could be a pretty dynamic 1-2 punch for the Missouri Tigers out of the back.
Missouri obviously also signed a pretty darn good wide receiver class. And you look at some of the guys that are losing, they've still got a lot of talent there in Columbia on hand. How do guys like Donovan Olukbade and those guys, how do they fit in? I mean, do you see some of those guys making the rotation next year? How do you think they fit in?
That's interesting, because I do think, as you mentioned, Kevin, they've got a lot of talent already in that wide receiver room. I think that they do a really good job about getting wide receivers on campus. And really, with as we mentioned, the quarterback talent that they have had, they've still been able to get some pretty darn good wide receivers. Olukbade is one of those guys that is a very technical route runner, a guy who just scores. Like, he just scores touchdowns. He can catch the ball. He's very good at getting open, and that's going to be really big. I'm curious to see how that translates to the SEC level, right? That's something we talked about with Luther Burden all the time. It was like, yeah, he did really well. See how it translates to the SEC. Then he gets there and you're like, all right, He's a real good guy there. But I mean, they even were able to make some to make some flips with Demarion Fulks too. The pit wide receiver, another guy who came on campus against the Arkansas game, and they were able to fill out their wide receiver room after I believe it was Javon Boggs flipped to I think he flipped again, right, to Florida State after
UCF.
Yes, after UCF. So I've had a hard time keeping track of them. But they're able to add these guys to this wide receiver class and bring in some really good wide receivers. I do think, going back to kind of our first point, has a lot to do with Matt Zollers. He's out there. He's recruiting these guys. Sean Terry, another wide receiver. I'd be remiss if I didn't bring him up. But this wide receiver class as a whole, I think that Alubade would be the one. If there's a freshman to contribute year one, it would be Alubade. But they do have a lot of depth in that wide receiver room already.
Tucker, was there any one area that you kind of feel like maybe Missouri didn't get enough of or didn't hit hard on enough that potentially maybe becomes a bigger portal interest for them in the next month?
Yeah, I think it's probably linebacker. They did grab a couple of linebackers in this class, but they're losing a good amount of linebacker experience in this upcoming draft. And I don't even think of the portal, but just a lot of guys who are just out of eligibility for linebacker. They do grab a couple of linebackers here, but it's going to be one of those positions. I think probably if we would have recorded this podcast at the beginning of the day instead of the end of the day, I would have told you defensive end too. Like they're losing a lot of DNs there, but they're able to flip some guys there and to get some defensive ends into this class that makes you feel a little bit better, a little bit more confident about this end class. But I think it's always going to be on that defensive side of the ball. Linebackers, the big one that I'm looking at for the portal.
I want to bring up a guy that Ryan and I are actually really familiar with, and that's Keaton Jones, a Kansas guy from Coffeyville, Field Kinley High School. I want to read these measurables to you because we were able to get him at combines. 5'2" laser time, 4'9" shuttle, 28-inch vertical, 6'9" wingspan, and 10-inch hands at 6'4", 315 pounds. Obviously a raw guy there, but as an offensive line guy, how do you like that clay to be able to build with?
Again, another big frame guy that Missouri's going for. They're going for these guys with their big frame guys. Brandon Jones, the offensive line coach there, has done a really good job, again, with molding these guys. One of those, when you turn on the film, right, Coffeyville, not the biggest of schools, right? You're not going to see the biggest of stadiums that he's
my wife's alma mater.
Yeah, there you go. See, like you're not seeing the big maybe Texas high school ones, but you're seeing him again be able to assert his dominance, and at that level, that's key to see all that. A guy who is going to move guys at will, something that I think is very translatable. I don't know if that's a real word. I think I might have made that up, but something that can translate to the next level, I think. And again, it's just one of those, as you mentioned, Kevin, he's just a big ball of clay that they can mold how they want to use him. I think he's probably more of an interior guy formed with that size that he has, but one of those that gets you really excited about the future.
All right, Tucker, I'm going to put you on the spot for kind of the whole Missouri fan base, right?
Yeah.
What is that kind of the pulse in terms of recruiting, right? Let's just put it under that microscope and not maybe anything that happens on the field, but the pulse of Missouri fans, are they pretty happy and pleased with what Eli Drinkwitz has proven with this staff he can do as a recruiter?
I think so. I think overall people are very happy with Drinkwitz's recruiting ability. And that's been a really big thing is at the University of Missouri, you saw maybe a dip in recruiting after Gary Pinkel left at the last regime. And now you're starting to see more of that high-level talent choosing to come to Missouri over Oregon's or Alabama's or Texas A&M's or Texas. They're in the conversation with those high-end schools, just beat Michigan out for Hilson. And like there's some pretty serious conversations of athletic ability that you are having in Columbia, and I think that's a big reason for Eli Drinkwitz. Again, I want to go back to the game against Arkansas. They had 3 guys that they flipped who were committed to other schools that were at the game, and they were able to convince them to come to the University of Missouri by being at that snow game that they had against Arkansas. I don't think that's a coincidence, right? I think that's Drink being really good at being able to sell the vision that he has at the University of Missouri.
Well, Tucker, thanks again for joining us, and thanks to all of you for watching and listening to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on KCSN. If you like what you've seen or heard, leave us a like, subscribe, or hit us with a 5-star rating. And until next time, we'll see you on the trail, and take care.